This week we are starting a new series, 4 weeks, on churchy symbols that we see a lot in church. Today is light, and then we'll do water and the lamb and fish. There are so many symbols in religions, all different kinds of religions. Rasta has a lion. A lot of people in Nederland like the colors of Rasta. Islam has a crescent and a star. Judaism has a star, but it has 6 points. Baha'i has a star, and it has 9 points. So, this banner is right there, some of you can see, full of symbols for Christianity. These windows are full of symbols that are really appropriate to the Christian faith, but also to this community that we hold on to here. This tree here is a symbol, and this symbol means that Hansen forgot to ask anyone to help put the tree down. So this week, if anyone wants to help put all the Christmas decorations away, I would love your help in that. My point in that is that religion and faith is inherently symbolic. I don't think we can get very far experiencing or reflecting on God or talking about our faith without some kind of a symbols. And that's not supposed to be a controversial point. I'm not trying to be divisive. Some people do think that everything about religion is symbolic, and others think that you can talk very literally about God. But even folks on this side, when they share the story of their faith, there is poetry, there is metaphor, there is art, there is parable, there is symbols. And so as I understand how the journey of faith works, across all different cultures, across all different traditions, across whatever expressions that we have, it's just part of the human condition to use these little markers, these little signs that we do understand. We understand those signs to point to something that's just a little deeper and thicker and difficult to understand. But sometimes we take these signs for granted. And as ubiquitous as they are in our faith life, maybe because they're so common, we tend to ignore what the symbols are trying to tell us. And the ones we do pay close attention to, like Christmas trees, sometimes we don't do a great job of teaching our younger kids what they mean. So the meaning of the dove, there's a dove up there somewhere. You know, frankly, that meaning has been dulled over the generations. Or the meaning of the cross. We see the cross all the time on necklaces, and rappers wear it, and somehow we've lost something about what the cross means. But even when we do, especially when pastors and religious leaders are trying to hold on to those symbols, sometimes we don't do a good job of clarifying what they mean, or what they can mean. Because I don't think there has to be just one meaning to a symbol. So there might be better explanations, and there might be explanations that kind of connect for you better. But for me, my job is to clarify what those symbols could mean. And I would much rather open up what the words and the colors and the images can mean than to constrict what God can be for you. So that's the next 4 weeks. The lectionary leads us through 4 stories about very churchy symbols that seem to matter for some reason. And I'm going to try, and I'm going to hope and pray that you can connect God in your life through light and water and a lamb and a fish. And here's how we're going to proceed. We're going to start each sermon with a little bit of historical context. So if you like to learn stuff, we'll start with that. And then we'll try to see what those symbols mean, and then we're going to try to see what those symbols matter to your life. And week 1, since tomorrow is Epiphany, the time we celebrate the star of Christmas, hanging out over Bethlehem so that the Magi can come and find Jesus, we're going to talk today about light. There are stories about light in just about every religion you can look for. I looked around a little bit this week, and religious figures with lights and with stars, they're everywhere. So in Hinduism, Krishna, the story about Krishna, by the way, Krishna is blue and has a flute. I have no idea why. Do you know why Krishna is blue? No idea. But that means something. For people who are steeped in Hindu tradition, that means something that we miss out on. But Krishna's legend of his birth is that his mother at the time was pure light. So he's born of pure light. It means something to folks of that tradition. Or if you go south a little bit from there, Lao Tzu, who was a real person, he wrote the Tao Te Ching, and his legend of his birth is that a star impregnated his mother. Some people think it was a comet the same day as he was born, but however it came about, there's this legend that Lao Tzu is somehow connected to light. Or check out the Romans. Around the time of Jesus, they had a holiday right on the winter solstice. This is the time of the year, of course, where the sun is in the sky for the least amount of time and where everyone can look forward to the sun growing and getting longer and longer during the year. On that day, the Romans celebrated the birthday of the unconquered sun. And that winter solstice was on what day then? The disagreement here. It was on the 25th then. We've adjusted calendars since then, but it was on December 25th then is when they celebrated that. And for all the conspiracy theories out there about Christmas and pagans and all that stuff, read my article in the Mountaineer last week. It tried to explain everything it could. Maybe Barbara will let me post it on the church Facebook page so we can understand how we had it first, December 25th, in our own way. My point is this, that all sorts of cultures, in all different times, in all different places, for all different people, light and starlight has been important. And it's connected to God's, and it's connected to faith. So the Hebrews, the people from which Jesus grew up, most of us know something about Genesis 1, first book of the Bible. You open up page 1, and in that story about the creation of the world, what was the very first thing they created? Light. Notice, though, God did not create the sun until day 4, or the moon, as we heard up here, or the stars. Somehow light itself was foundational, important, essential, just central to the world, more so than the particular sources of light. Is that a scientific theory? Is it holy men trying to tell us something about how they understand God? I don't know. Does it lead us somehow to think about how light is important, or the symbol of light is important to our world? I hope so. And Jesus, for growing up in this Jewish tradition steeped in light, right as he was growing up, it had a special relevance, a new relevance that had never been around really in that culture. Most Jewish people in those days, around Jesus' lifetime, were part of two political parties, denominations, whatever you want to call them. One was the Pharisees, the other were the Sadducees. But there was a third group out there called the Essenes. And they tended to separate out and live in the wilderness, or if they lived in cities, they would kind of live in what we think of as intentional communities in cities. And these were definitely a different group. They lived communally rather than in family systems. Their day revolved around prayer and revolved around ritual, so they would kind of wash every morning, a bit like we do a baptism. They aimed their life towards simplicity and to transform their inner soul and to transform the world. The Dead Sea Scrolls that you've heard of probably came from their library. That was probably something they held on to. And the unique central point that the Essenes cared about, that pointed them out different from everyone else, was this. The world is made up of two forces, light and darkness. Other folks in that time think the world might be good or evil, body and spirit. And many of us have thoughts like that as well. But for the Essenes, they focused on this. That the point of life is to be the light and to share the light. And some people think that Jesus hung out with the Essenes in that little gap of time that we don't know anything about his life. And some people think John, who wrote the scripture that we read today, some people think he was influenced by the Essenes. And whether those guesses are correct or not, Jesus and the early Christians were absolutely affected by this, one, a very natural and human symbol, two, something that was traditional in the Hebrew faith, and three, something that was given a fresh meaning in their immediate culture. And then Jesus and those early Christians took that light and they enriched it in deep and powerful ways. What has come into being in him was life, and life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. Sunrise this morning was, I couldn't see the sun, but it had this nice purple to it. There were some cool clouds out there. About 15 years ago, I was visiting friends around Christmas time in North Carolina and was going to drive up to see family in Virginia. I had some extra time, so I figured I'd go by the Blue Ridge Parkway. For those of you who've never been out east, we have Trail Ridge Road out here, which goes way up the mountain. Blue Ridge Parkway is kind of like the East Coast Trail Ridge Road. It winds around beautiful mountains. You see wonderful vistas, drops down a little bit, and then goes into Virginia. It's called Skyline Drive, and you can see forever. A cool river that just does this little thing here, like ski turns. So I'm driving up there, and my plan is to go camping that night. I'm just going to throw my sleeping bag down on the ground on the Blue Ridge Parkway and wake up and continue on. Someday I'll tell you about having going turkey hunting the next day with my bare hands. I almost got one. It was really close, real fast. But on the 23rd, I'm driving up there, and I'm going slow, and I'm grabbing a soda here, and I'm taking pictures over there, and eventually I come to a nice little pull-out, and I pull over, and I grab my sleeping pad, and I just throw it on the grass right there, and I just go to sleep, and it's one of those just cold nights where you pull the sleeping bag up, and you tighten it up, and every time you move, it just moves a little bit, and all that cold air just rushes in and wakes you up, and then you try to go back to sleep. Well, early that Christmas Eve morning, I jerked a little bit, and I could feel the cold air just blow down to my toes, and so I opened up my eyes, and there was a deer. I mean, this close to my face, kind of just licking a little bit, and I jumped, and I was startled, and I'd like to think I was a courageous man, but the deer ran off, and I was more scared than the deer. But I controlled myself, and I pulled my sleeping bag back tight, and I let my eyes kind of look to the east, and I saw this is the prettiest sunrise I've ever seen in my life. I've seen thousands of sunrises. I've been awake in the morning just a ton of times, and this one stuck out with that mix of purple and orange and blue that it was as beautiful and it's as memorable and as fresh in my mind as it could be. You can't capture that thing on film. I tried. I have a terrible picture from an Instamatic camera, and I can't get it. You can wake up early. You can take the fanciest camera you want, set it up, have your coffee, take a super slow frame, but you're not going to get that magical picture, that one point where the day is born anew, that mix where night and dawn and day just all jumble together. You can't point to that moment or that process where light breaks into the world. And to say Jesus is the true light is to say that Jesus has broken into and is breaking into our world in a special and transformative way. To say Jesus is the light is to say God has given us and is giving us warmth and comfort and safety into a world that can very easily seem dark and cold. To say Jesus is the light is to say that there are things about God that are just so beautiful we cannot capture them with our language, we cannot capture them with our explanations, we can only sing, we can only paint, we can only tell stories. To say Jesus is the light is to say that somehow, in some way that gets expression through that guy's life, God is wrapped up in all the good things in the world. Even if their source of goodness seems obvious, somehow God is responsible or involved or coexistent or somehow effective. Somehow God is wrapped up in all those good things that are bright and beautiful in the world. To say that Jesus is the light of all people is to say that there are always opportunities for our life and all life to grow deeper and to grow richer and to grow fuller for all people. You know how our world is so obsessed with status and ranking and property and money, it can seem like only the most important people have access to God. Our world is so focused on money. I looked it up. You can buy property on the moon for $20 an acre. Liz, is there anywhere in Ned you can buy $20 an acre? It's got a pretty good view. $20 is a pretty good view. Plumbing's not so great, I hear. But you can. You cannot buy, however, you cannot buy property on the sun. No one has tried to do that. I swear you can go online and buy property on the moon. But you can't do it on the sun because the sun is life-giving for all people. Jesus is the light of all people. And not just for Christians. Not just for Christians who believe this or do that. This light is good news for all. To say Jesus is the light of all people is to say, I don't have all the answers. You don't have all the meaning. We together don't hold all the truth. But God might shine a light on you or on someone out there or on people far, far away in ways that none of us could ever expect. To say Jesus is the light of all people is to say we can learn from each other. Perhaps we must learn from each other and teach each other and serve each other. The night I pulled over on the Blue Ridge Parkway, got out of my truck and I'm throwing the sleeping bag down. My eyes were very used to the headlights and to my awesome radio on my old truck that was broken, but it had a few lights on it. My eyes were just adjusted to that. So I get out and the sky looked normal. It's kind of dark. There was a star here, star there. But there wasn't anything super exciting. There was a glow over there, probably Richmond or Lynchburg. We sometimes get a glow from Boulder or Denver right before the night gets really dark. And as the night went on, you know this if you camp at all, as the night goes on, your eyes begin to adjust to that darkness. And as your eyes begin to adjust, you start to see stars appear. And if you don't have a campfire, and if you resist the temptation of a flashlight, your eyes start to adjust in ways that you can actually find your way around and see your way around and see things that were just hiding before. The dark is still there, and you haven't done anything to take over the darkness. But your eyes, it's amazing, your eyes are designed just so, and the world is shaped just right, so that the darkness cannot conquer that light. And when you have patience to acclimate yourself, you can discover guidance, you can discover direction that was always there, hiding in the dark. To say that Jesus is the light is to say that the darkest nights of your soul cannot have the last word. Somehow, Jesus points towards something about God, something hopeful, something that guides us through the darkest tunnels. And whether you ever come to church, whether you know anything about Jesus, you kind of know that's true. You know there's something true about that. Even the most cynical person and that has the worst experiences in their life knows that they can get to the other side. They know that somehow they get through. You can name it will, you can name it conscience, you can name it grace, you can name it Jesus is my homeboy, whatever you want. But light is the symbol that says no matter how alone you feel, no matter how lost you are, we're going to get through this. You will make it through. When the whole world seems to be falling apart, a light tends to shine on those parts of your life that tremble with the least stability and the ambiguous significance. I call that God. And just like it takes patience and trust to acclimate your eyes so that you might find a way through that darkness, I believe we can cultivate an awareness and dependence on God's care and on God's guidance. Prayer does that. A loving faith community does that. Reading and studying about Jesus does that. And so I'll close with these simple words. We've said them 3 times now. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world.